Welcome, one and all, to our very exclusive online experience here today on Riverside. We're going to be talking about how to build a lean, mean, event running machine inside of HubSpot. All right. It's going to be a little bit of a different angle. Okay. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. We're not just going to be talking about Event Haply. You may notice I have a distinguished guest with me, Mr. James Fyfe from our very good friends over at Portant.
So it feels like a privilege to be here. I feel like I've watched so many of your videos and now I'm in it. It's amazing.
Listen, dude, you're in one now, right? You're in one. All right. We're living the dream together. That's what we're doing. Right. Okay, cool. So just a little bit of an agenda, folks. We always like to set one of these at the beginning, right? Otherwise, I'm going to go off the rails as I normally do. We'll just introduce myself and James if you haven't met us yet. We're going to talk about why event ops still feels so manual, especially inside of HubSpot. And we're going to provide you an alternate reality, if you will, on a better way to do this. But we're also going to be mixing in a little bit of what Portant brings into the table. And we're going to talk about document generation in HubSpot, but specifically through the lens of managing events. You can generate documents for damn near about anything these days, but it becomes something special when you mix in your event management experience with this. Well, we'll dive into the introductions here. Guys, my name is Max. I'm the chief evangelist over here at Hapily, 7.5-year HubSpot alum. HubSpot is my everything. And I'm glad I get to continue to express myself around all things HubSpot over here at this wonderful little company building apps on the platform called Hapily. And I'm joined by my distinguished colleague and new friend, James. James, can you take a second to introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name's James. I'm one of the co-founders of Portant. And yeah, we've not 7 years in the ecosystem. We're actually just 2.5 years in the ecosystem, but we're loving it. And awesome. It's been great. Yeah.
How's it been playing in the pool that is the HubSpot app ecosystem thus far, James?
We felt right at home from like day one. It's been good. You're fumbling around looking for a community, and I feel like I found my crew.
You found home here. We love it. We're happy to have you. We're one big happy family of app builders in the HubSpot ecosystem. Cool. All right, folks, let's talk about why you're here, right? You joined us live. Maybe you're watching the recording later on. Who knows, right? But you're probably here for a couple of similar reasons, right? Especially if you're trying to attempting to do any kind of cohesive event management on HubSpot these days. Perhaps you're wrestling still with the old event planning spreadsheet, right? You've done a really great job at bringing your sales and marketing and service into HubSpot, but for some reason you're still managing those old events in spreadsheets, and maybe that's giving you a little bit of pre-HubSpot PTSD of managing all that other stuff in spreadsheets too as well. Perhaps you're also making we'll call it an attempt to drive like registrations or track attendance inside of HubSpot. I'll tell you this, the marketing events object doesn't make that easy one bit, right? Nor do many of the integrations, I'll put in real deep air quotes here, that other point solutions have with HubSpot. You might also be thinking like, hey, it's pretty difficult to be able to personalize some of the documentation that I'm distributing, right, to folks that attend your events, be it like something like a ticket or a certification or some kind of flyer, right? Maybe something you're sticking up at your booth with a QR code, right? Document generation is an important part of event management. So if you're having some pains around either, you're probably having pains around both. That's a weird sentence that I thought of immediately and just said. And also maybe post-event communication and documentations, like I mentioned, with something like maybe like a certificate. Things like that can be difficult. Maybe sending those out isn't always getting done, and it's falling through the cracks because it's hard to do. Yet another task that you have to give yourself, right? There's a lot of reasons why you might be here. You might be watching this, all right? But let's start talking about this. The fact of the matter is trying to balance doing all of these things inside of HubSpot is hard. Having to do a lot of this stuff manually out of HubSpot equally sucks, right? But it starts to become a unique challenge when you attempt to do it all inside of HubSpot, right? And hopefully using a balance of Event Hapily and Portant, which you're going to learn about today, will bring a little bit of, we'll say, quality of life increase to your day-to-day inside of HubSpot, right? So let's start talking about it. Now, here's the deal. There is a better way to do it. There's a better way to manage your events inside of HubSpot, right? And that also comes down to planning your events inside of HubSpot instead of planning them in the spreadsheets, right? Being able to not only drive registration, but track attendance inside of HubSpot. You could do this now using all native HubSpot tools, all right? And we're going to show you how to do that in a little bit. But did you know that you can also generate documents inside of HubSpot now? James, I just want to ask a question. Hey, dude, where were you 5 years ago when I was working at HubSpot and people were asking me about document generation? And I was like, I don't know. How long have you guys been around, actually?
We were just in our startup accelerator 5 years ago. You had to make me think that. But yeah,
man,
it was middle of COVID, or COVID had just started, hadn't it?
I wish I was familiar with you guys when I was still working with HubSpot customers, because there's so many situations. Like when you were showing me your stuff for the first time, there were so many situations where I was just having these flashbacks to being an SE or an implementation specialist. Being like, really could have used this a while ago. Thanks for doing it now, though. Right? Yeah.
I am in the future, so
you are in the future. That is correct. Yeah. Technically, it is Wednesday for you, whereas now we're living in the past.
Just to fill everybody in, I'm actually based in Sydney, so that's why I'm calling that out.
Exactly. I'm going to have James introduce Portant in a second, but just in case you guys haven't heard of Event Hapily, okay, what we've built is essentially an app that adds in all of the missing pieces that HubSpot lacks from a platform perspective to be able to do event management on HubSpot. So our goal with Event Hapily is to literally turn HubSpot into an event management platform, which it is not, which is why it's hard to do this stuff, right? But that's our goal. So things like helping you set up and manage your events, driving all of your registration, driving all of your attendance tracking, and leveraging all the stuff that HubSpot's really good at, right? Like email automation. How do we smartly intertwine with that? And how do we make it easier to do email marketing and things like that around your events, and automating a lot of that stuff with HubSpot with a couple of little extra features and stuff like there that make it much easier than it is to do out of the box. We also have tools for lead capture if you're a company that doesn't necessarily host a lot of your own events, but you attend a lot of trade shows and things like that. And then we even do post-event surveys. You can do deal attribution based on your events. There's a lot of stuff that we do. But what's even cooler is when you start to plug in other apps that do different stuff on HubSpot, and HubSpot starts to act as the universal translator, if you will, for any and all apps, or for any and all data you might store inside of HubSpot, and any other additional functionality you might need. And that's where we bring in our friends Portant, who do document generation. Now, James, I'm going to let you do a little bit more justice explaining what Portant is to everybody, so we can give them sort of the lay of the land of where you guys come in.
Yeah, sure. I think the thing with document generation is it can be so many different things. So I think in this particular context, just calling out a few of the use cases is really key. We can generate name badges and tickets with images, dynamic images inserted into them. And we could do speaker agreements. So if you have to sign up some people for a contract, we could manage that all through Portant, including the e-sign. And then also the attendance certificates, or if you're maybe holding a webinar which has some kind of award at the end of it, or there's a test and then you get accredited, we can manage that all through. So you can be approved with that. But it really is in the same way that Hapily is. We're really baked into HubSpot. People using Portant never have to leave HubSpot, which is why this is such a good pairing. We are both full, we've jumped into the HubSpot ecosystem with 2 feet. And we're loving it, as I mentioned earlier. But you can see that on the right-hand side. HubSpot workflow actions, we've got those custom objects and properties. I'll go into a little bit more depth on those custom objects later, but it really is limitless the way that you can connect them. And that's why Hapily and Portant make such a good partnership.
And I noticed it's Google Docs is the other big piece of this, right?
Yeah. This is the key thing. I think that sometimes there are other, maybe a PDF tool that has its own version of a PDF editor that you could use. And the formatting options with that are limited because they've had to build the PDF editor themselves. And surprise, it takes a lot of work to make a good document editor. So we've just used Google Docs and slides, which are native or you're used to using them. And so you can produce the documents and make them look exactly the way you want them to look. Or you can use existing templates. Maybe you have them already. And so the setup speed is much quicker.
Yeah, so super friendly. Also, like if you guys are a Google shop, this is like also a plus one, right? But like you can also generate like PDFs and stuff like that too as well, right? And what are some
documents as well?
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't even know that. You can do Microsoft documents too.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the other big use cases that you guys have outside of the event stuff? I know that a lot of the times you're playing mostly in contracts and like other kinds of documents besides event stuff too, right?
Yeah, I'd say that events and certificates especially is probably our third largest use case.
Oh, really? Okay. Which it's still high on the list. Yeah.
yeah, it's still pretty big. But the other one is sales documents, like the quotes. Quote Happily and Portant also play pretty nicely. Yeah. There's a webinar coming up about that next week. Exactly. If you're interested.
Yeah, HubSpot quotes really well. We don't do DocGen at all. So this is another match made in heaven there.
100%. Yeah. And then the contracting. A lot of people are ripping out DocuSign because of their ridiculous costs and replacing it with Portant because we have our own e-signing software solution built in. And so you can customize contracts and then send them out for e-signature and have that all tracked within the deal or contact or company or custom object record. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And so we'll be able to see what this actually looks like a little bit later on, guys. So let's dive into it. Right. So let's talk about, again, we've hyped up both of our little babies here, our little appies, right? Let's actually dive into HubSpot and kind of show you what life could be like, right? Because life could be a dream if we set HubSpot up the right way. Cool. All right. So let's start talking first about Event Happily. And then I'm going to ever so elegantly weave it into where Portant comes into play, especially when we get into the document generation side of things. Let's start talking about it. Event Happily. All right. When you install Event Happily, there's like a couple of key things that you should know, right? And the big thing is that we install some of these custom objects here, right? We install events, sessions, and registrants. The real important ones that we're going to talk about today in the context of everything that we're doing is events and registrants. Okay. For events, we're using this instead of HubSpot's marketing events object because the marketing events object is not really customizable and it really lacks in a lot of the features we wish it had that we do see in custom objects. So we use a custom object called Happily Events in order to give you the representation of the event itself inside of HubSpot. We also have this session objects. This is if you're doing like a more complex event where someone might sign up for an event and then choose additional sessions to go to at said event. So if you think of inbound as the event, and then you think of the product keynote and like the, I don't know, some TED talk, I don't know, some talk or whatever inside of it, those are individual things you can sign up for. We're not going to pay too much attention to that today, but registrants is the other one that you should really know. Registrant objects inside of Event Happily represent an instance of someone actually signing up to go to an event, right? So it's a record that's meant to say that time Max went to inbound, right? So every single time you register for an event, you get a registrant object created for you. They associate to the event. They associate to the sessions. It holds all the information that's unique about that registration. So it could be your badge number, your t-shirt size, your dietary restrictions, whatever it may be, right? But again, this whole experience starts by going and creating your event, right? So just like you would create a company, a contact record, a deal, or a ticket, you would come into here, you'd go hit create Happily event. You'd give some information about your event, and then it would go and actually create an event object for you. So this is one of the big benefits of using custom objects in HubSpot is you can really use these objects however you want, and you can build in all sorts of features and functionality depending on how creative you get with workflows and cards and single object reports and all these different things that you can do. I've got a pretty bare bones setup here for the sake of this demo here, right? But this event object is really meant to be the place before the event leading up to it that you can work in, right? So if you're planning the event, you can write notes, you can upload files, you can tag each other, you can have conversations just like you can with any other object inside of HubSpot. So all of a sudden it becomes a really great space to collaborate, right? Keep track of stuff. You can build pipelines, you can do whatever, right? It's a custom object. The options are really like limitless here, right?
Hey Max, however, I've got a question for you. Can you use the pipelines to plan the events so you can have a pipeline of...
Oh yeah, dude. Cool. We have customers that like what they'll do is they'll create a pipeline where it's like events in different phases. So they've got like a planning stage, a upcoming stage, a during stage, a completed stage. And then what they'll do is they'll build a whole bunch of like automation off of it. So they might be like, amazing. Cool, when the event's complete, move it to the, use the date fields to move it to like the complete stage. And then that might fire off a workflow that sends emails to everybody who attended the event, right? You can do a lot. But like when I say get yourself out of the spreadsheet, it's as simple as using the objects in HubSpot to do what you were doing on the spreadsheet. We have people track expenses for their event inside of this, whether it's doing like a whole custom object for expense, like line items, or even just using simple fields on it. You can really customize this however you want because it's a HubSpot object at the end of the day. It also enables us to use a lot of the other features inside of HubSpot that make things like much easier from a like creating registrations and assets and things like that for your event, right? For example, the way that we have it set up is we lean pretty heavily on Content Hub, right? Because this is a Content Hub heavy app because we help you build registration pages, all sorts of like event promotion stuff, emails, things like that. So cool thing is like as soon as you create your event, what's really neat is that we auto-generate a registration page for you, right? So we're using HubSpot's dynamic content here to automatically create registration pages so you don't have to create a new one every single time. If you're someone who's struggling with the fact that every single time you have a new event, you've got to go clone the form, clone the list, clone the landing page, just change a couple things on it, things like that. Our event records are dynamically feeding information into all these different CMS modules that we've created that work really well with HubSpot dynamic content, right? We even have these really special form modules that have a ton of functionality baked into them, right? So for example, we can limit registration, right? So if there was too many people signed up for this event, this form actually wouldn't even show up. It would just show a little thing saying, sorry, the event's full, or whatever you wanted it to say. You could also send someone off to a wait list if you wanted to do that instead. On top of that, though, you can configure these forms to do multi-person registration. So if you want to sign up you and a friend without having to build a bunch of insane functionality in the background, you can configure it to do that. Then I have this form actually configured to show sessions. Now, I don't have any sessions on this form, but if I did, what I might see down here is not only a form to register for the event, but people can obviously also choose a whole bunch of different sessions occurring at the event if you only wanted them to sign up for certain things or whatever it may be. And we have a bunch of configuration options behind that too as well, right? So we've built in a whole bunch of these. We have a whole theme and a ton of different modules that do a million different things that you need for anything from listing pages to registrant dynamic pages for choosing sessions to just your generic like event sign up pages. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can show you, maybe if we have a little bit of time at the end. But what happens is when someone actually fills out one of these HubSpot forms that's used with our really super cool module here, it'll actually create a registrant record, right? So we can see under hapily registrants in my event, we've got this registrant for Max Cohen, okay? So when you go to these registrant records, again, these records are made to represent each time someone signs up for a different event. So it's almost like a unique pairing between a contact and an event record. And then this information gets held forever. One of the biggest issues with most event tools out there, like Eventbrite, for example, right, is the only way they represent this information on the contact record, right, or at least in any way that you can use in like reporting and analytics and automation and stuff like that, is all they do is they just like overwrite contact properties. What's the last event they signed up for? What's the last this or that? Whereas we store all this information in registrant records so you can do automation off of it, reporting off of it, and it kind of stores that forever and doesn't get overwritten like a single contact property does. And this holds a lot of information. You'll also see it does things like generate a QR code, okay, which I can then stuff in an email and send to somebody, right, as soon as they register for the event. The amount of automation and stuff that you can trigger off this registrant object alone is very vast, but automatically comes with all the information that we need to put together a nice little email to say, hey, thanks for registering for the event. I'll show you an example of that in a second. We could always take it a step further. Just so everybody knows too, another thing that we can do is automatically generate things like our dynamic check-in pages, right? So I could come into here, I could check this person in. They would show as attended instead of just registered for an event. So like we update a bunch of association labels, we change a bunch of stuff on the record, right? And again, this is all just like native HubSpot CMS stuff. Here's the question that I get a lot, and it's perfect that we ended up talking, Because people ask me this and I go, oh, I got a pretty dumb answer. Oftentimes when we're like on a sales call or people are using this and they go, oh, cool, that's great. You can send an email with a QR code, which is great for most people. It's, hey, take the email, show the email, zoom in, go ahead and scan it. And when you scan that QR code, they get marked as attended inside of our system, right? But then I get people that ask me, can you make them a printable ticket? And I go, guess just print the email, which never looks good, by the way. So it's generally, I have a pretty bad answer for that. And that's because our tool doesn't like natively do any document generation, right? Because that's what you're asking for when you're saying, hey, can you generate a ticket? Luckily, James and his jolly gang came around, right? And now we have an answer for this, right? And this is like a really great example of when you use apps together in HubSpot, right? You can create these really awesome 1 + 1 = 3 moments, right? Because not only can I go ahead and create an email, for example, that I send through a workflow that sends something like this, right? Where it's like, hey, thanks for registering for the event. You can view your sessions here. Here's a QR code. Scan this, right? What I can do instead is I can use Portant, okay, to set up a little workflow that says any single time one of my happily registrant records gets created, automatically go and generate a beautiful ticket that I can then put on someone's record and send it in an email, right? So instead of just printing out an email with all the stupid information up at the top or whatever it may be, I can use my data from HubSpot generated from Event Happily to dynamically generate a PDF of a ticket, right? And then send it to somebody because all this information gets written back to that registrant object, right? So what ends up happening is, yep, they get the email, but then they can go ahead and click a link here and boom, they have a nice, beautiful PDF printable ticket that they can print out and take to the event with them and get someone to scan it and it'll check them in inside of Event Happily. These are the types of experiences and problems you can solve, or experiences you can create and problems you can solve when you get really tactical and creative in the way that you take two different apps and use them together inside of Hub. This is more of an ad for HubSpot now at this point than it is for us. But like this is one of the beauties of HubSpot, right?
It's as soon as you use the HubSpot as a source of truth, as your central source of truth, and you use apps that fully buy into that as well, you get natural combinations, which before we even started talking, we were like, or when we started talking, a lot of this became obvious that it just worked out the box because we both signed up to the same philosophy where it's, oh yeah, what do you do? Oh, I save this information back as a custom property in this custom object. And then, I can actually use that information. So it just works out of the box.
Yeah, well, that's why I say HubSpot is that sort of like universal translator, right? Because it takes all of the data and puts it in one single language, and that is HubSpot objects and HubSpot properties, right? And if every app can read that and do stuff with it, right, and make magic with it, that all of a sudden means like all of these different apps that don't necessarily have an integration with one another naturally get one just by the means of being on HubSpot, which is really cool. So James, what I want to do is you can do a much better walkthrough of like how Portant works. And then you got a couple other examples and we can talk through some of the different things people can do. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I'm going to kick it over to you so you can talk a little bit more about on the Portant side. And as people are watching this, keep in mind, we're talking about this through like an event lens, right? Because we do events, right? But like this, the same principles can apply to any sort of object or data inside of HubSpot, right? As we go through it. So James, take it away.
Yeah, I think just adding on top of that, like not all integrations in that marketplace or in the HubSpot marketplace are built the same. There are ones that just want to slurp out the data and put it in their system.
Yo, slurp out the data is wild. Anyway, go ahead.
It's like almost that's their strategy. It's, we're just going to collect all that HubSpot data and we're going to replicate it in ours. And then you're going to have two sources of truth to manage. How about you deal with that? It's like,
have fun.
This is actually causing chaos.
This sucks. Anyway, I hate it here. Yeah.
Yep. As Max showed you, this is like what Portant workflow looks like. We take information from HubSpot and we run it through different types of document templates. So if I jump into this one here, this is a Google Slides template, but we could also have a Google Docs template or a Google Sheets template or a PDF template. It can be anything. And the thing that makes that really magical or great is that we have all the formatting options available up here. So, I can change this font to a different font because this is just Google Slides. And in the same way, this slide can live in a shared location as well. This doesn't have to be in in your personal. Multiple people can be editing it, so you get that great effect of collaboration just as a bonus.
Yeah, so it's like you can just create a file and give it to someone. So it's, I just want a PDF.
Correct.
Here's a PDF.
Yeah.
But like you can also create like a public Google Docs file that like your customer could come in and like collaborate on with you or something like that.
The great thing that I see sometimes is that maybe you've got like a marketing ops person who's a whiz at making HubSpot workflows, and they have built the workflow, but maybe they're not very good at designing. And they've built the ticket workflow or the certificate workflow, and then they send that file to the marketing department and say, hey, can you make this look pretty? And then the marketing department just goes and makes that, or the designer in that department makes that look pretty, and they don't need to connect it again. It was the linked file. So then when maybe a logo gets updated in the future, you can just update the brand logo for that case. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a whole bunch of different properties from HubSpot. So if I wanted to, say, change this name to the name of the contact object, I can just click in here to copy and then paste into the document this tag, which is in curly brackets. And then,
curly brackets cursive is really funny.
Yeah, it's crazy,
hysterical.
And then we can add as many of these properties into the ticket as we want, and they can be custom properties, they could be image properties, as Max showed you. That QR code was an image property which was saved into HubSpot. You can have calculated fields. There's loads of different options for there, like conditional content. If a certain value is true in HubSpot, put in this information. So you can build it out to be quite complex. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it super simple. Just put the first name in there and then look at a few of the other options. So
I just had another. Wait, go ahead. And I have another idea that I want to throw out there. I was going to say, so like you have signatures, right? We've had customers that have a waiver process. Like you're doing an event and you might need a waiver to be signed. And only until someone actually signs the waiver do you want to register them for the event, right? Another one that we've seen too is we had like an educational company do these big field trips, right? And so what they would do is they would have kids be created as registrants, but then on there was like a parent record that gets created, right? And what they'd have to do is they'd have to get what's the word I'm looking for? A permission slip signed. They could literally auto-generate the permission slips, send them out and get a signature, and then use that automation to actually trigger the completion of the registration getting created. Like that just popped in. I don't know how I didn't think of that before when we were talking, but yeah.
And we save the status of that as well on the object. So when that signature has been completed by the parent or by the registrant that they sign up to whatever dangerous stuff they're going to get up to, it says, hey, signed. And then you can move that person as like an attendee that has the permission to attend. Whatever.
Got it. So it flicks like a little checkbox or some property on there that you can see it and then it progresses from that. Yeah.
And that's you have really a full audit trail of like where that happened and how it was signed, and that's all automatically saved. Say the accident did happen, you just have to go into the object. It's all saved in HubSpot. You're backed up from that.
Yeah. Something that I didn't really show is not only did it like I'm not showing the property here on the left, but not only does it like put the link to the PDF in a property that I can then use as a token, but it also goes and puts those documents directly on the registrant record. So what's really great about this is if someone like calls me and they're like, oh, I lost my ticket or I need another ticket or whatever, I can come right into the registrant record, open up the ticket and just send someone the ticket. Here's your PDF of your ticket, just like that, because it's all at my fingertips right here. Something that we've seen a lot, and you may have seen something similar if this was one of the suggested ones, right, is that we have people do like courses on Event Happily, right? And what they'll do is they'll say, and it could be like a 1-day course, right? We're about to launch our brand new Zoom integration soon, by the way. Ryan will probably be mad at me for mentioning that, right? But we integrate with Zoom, but we have a new version of the Zoom integration coming, right? So a lot of people, they'll do these like online courses, right? And some will just be a day. And in that case, they'll just say, oh, we just have an event, right? If you attend it, you get the certification, right? Yep. Some people will say, we're a course, but that course is like 10 different individual sessions that you have to attend, right?
Right.
And so what gets really interesting there is you can stay with, hey, how do I make sure someone actually attended all 10 sessions in order to be able to get like the certificate at the end, right? Mm-hmm. And so the way that we could easily do that is when we have all of our sessions, when you register for the event, you get signed up for all the sessions too as well, right? But there's an association label between the session and the registrant object, right? And it'll actually tell you if it's attended. It'll start with registered, but then when someone actually attends the session and you mark them as attended, whether it's they attend through Zoom and it automatically happens, or let's say it's an in-person training or something like that, you mark them off as attended using either our CMS module or like one of the QR codes, things like that. What we do is we update the association labels to say they're attended, right? So a cool thing you can do in HubSpot is you could go onto that registrant object and you could say, create a roll-up field. So like a calculated field of how many attended sessions are actually associated to this registrant, right? So let's say you have to attend all 10 courses or all 10 sessions in order to get the certification, right? What you could literally do is you could have a registrant-based workflow that would say, I don't know, it's a random example, but you could say, as soon as attended sessions equals 10, fire off the email that includes the certification, right? Generate the certification and then send it. So like you could even stop the certification from even getting generated until they've met the requirements to get the certification, and then fire off the email when it has it is like a good example I could think of. Right.
And the other thing which you could do with that is say if in the sessions you were getting different scores or different marks, maybe there was a test, I don't know, but we can actually put a table of their attainment or their marks inside the document. You could be like, oh, for session 1 on this course, you actually scored 95%, but on session 2, you didn't do too great. You scored 45%.
Okay.
And so you can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You're bringing up a really good point here, right? Because try to go do that in Eventbrite. You're not going to be able to, because Eventbrite's not built for that. Now, does that come as a feature out of the box with Event Happily? No, but it lives on HubSpot, which means if you had maybe some other app like a Zapier, like any other iPass system, maybe you're using HubSpot's APIs, perhaps you're getting really creative and doing like custom event, like behavioral event completions, right? You could easily pipe in data from a test someone takes, an evaluation, or whatever, pipe it onto the registrant object, and then do exactly what you just said, right? That's like it could be a workflow that says, is registrant has completed event, test, and property of score is greater than 90. If not, don't do anything. If yes, generate the certificate, right?
Yep.
See, that's the thing. Yeah, sure, not a native feature, but all of a sudden becomes a possibility because it's happening on HubSpot, which is the really exciting thing.
And these are things which you would have had to wait for like a developer to do in the past. Yes. Whereas just anybody who's able to use HubSpot workflows can build this stuff. And
so that's the thing. If you're using some sort of like testing platform that integrates with a Zapier or something like that, you probably don't need a developer. If you're super advanced and have your own internal proprietary scoring system and like testing platform and you have a developer, you can write that data in a HubSpot. Like you can take the advanced or like the easier sort of iPass route. And like HubSpot, again, HubSpot is serving as that universal translator in this equation. I think also one that we're like missing here too, I don't know if you have an example of it too, but like we get asked about name badges all the time. And like, you can almost think of that the same way as a ticket, right? Where it's, if someone like signs up for the event, like we want to print them out like a name badge. Is that something you guys have come across too?
Yeah, we can do name badges. And no one's actually requested that from us, but that's possible.
Well,
Yeah,
now they definitely will
do that.
at some point.
Yeah.
We've done it. We've done it through like CMS modules, which can get like a little bit hairy every once in a while. But shout out to Dax, our co-founder. He created like a CMS module that like brings in, I think, the logo of someone's company and like the name on their registrant record. And it actually, you have to create like a link that goes to it and everything. And it's, don't get me wrong, it works with Zebra printers. It's cool. But can someone go in there and drag and drop edit exactly the layout and how it works? No, but with yours, it's much easier, right, than doing it through HubSpot CMS or something like that. Cool. Anything else you want to show the folks with Portant before we move on here?
Yeah, just on this, like you can customize the naming structure of the file. So when that does appear in HubSpot, it can have the name of the contact or registrant on there. We can control what the PDF, how they're stored in HubSpot as a private file or public non-indexable files and stuff. So just going into that, just digging a little bit deeper into how it looks here is...
That's a beautiful UI extension, I just want to say. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
We have this nice table, which we spent a long time trying to come up with, and you can generate documents all from the actual records as well. We've been talking a lot about workflows and having this all happen behind the scenes. But say if you wanted to do a one-by-one, you could click in, run the certificate workflow, and you see an example of it here, and then you can run it. So you can generate it all from this record and not leave the tab. I hate the idea that another app means another tab you've got to have open on your browser.
Sure.
We don't want to do that.
A really good example.
Baked in here.
A really good example to tie to the event happily stuff, right? Is, and I think you mentioned it earlier, it was like speaker contracts, right? So like we have these CMS modules that come with event happily that will display speakers, right, on a registration page or an event page or something like that, right? And it's like another object you can install. It doesn't install automatically because we're not trying to create 5 custom objects in your portal. But if you work with our onboarding team, we can get you speakers and sponsors and everything. And what people will do is they'll have these speakers show up on the registration pages themselves, right? But the other thing is people will use these speaker objects to actually manage like the speaker engagement pre-event, right? So they'll say, oh, this person wants to speak at this event. We've got to talk to them. Like people will use HubSpot forms to like submit speakership inquiries, right? So if you want to be a speaker at this event, fill the form out, generates a speaker object, right? And then they could say, oh, when this is like set to approved, it'll show up on like the CMS module for the registration page, right? Or like when we assign them to their different sessions or whatever it may be, right? But again, like they manage like a lot of the pre-communication, like approving these speakers, that whole process in there. But like now they could have this card on the speaker object and like literally just hit generate speaker contract, and it would pull in all the details from the speaker, their name, the company they came from, the session it's going to be on, like whatever it may be, because you can do associated objects too, right? So yeah, that's another really great use case for people that I don't even think you'd ever even, because you even imagine, oh, I'm going to do my speaker selection and confirmation process through my HubSpot CRM. It's like, dude, the stuff that's possible nowadays when you put apps together is nuts.
Max, just my one more thing is just launched today, and this is the first time we're announcing it, is that you can go into the sources, and now if you can see this, you can select any object from your object library. The ones that come out of the box are here, and any custom object. So you can literally connect to anything within HubSpot as of today. As of 12 hours ago. So
we got that sneak peek when we were doing it, right? We got that.
This is the one more
we got that. We got that alpha beta. Yeah, totally. And so, so for any event happily users, what you would see when you have this configured is underneath custom objects, you see your happily events, happily sessions, happily registrants, speakers, sponsors, things like that. Yep. Wow, you got that object library, the object library support real quick. That is still fresh.
We work quick
in the world of HubSpot. Yeah. That's awesome. I think we ran through every single idea under the sun. I'm really stoked that you guys also work with Office, right? Because Microsoft, because I was under the impression completely that it was only Google. And so now I've got someone I want to send this recording, and shout out Janelle. You know who you are, favorite customer. Folks, some key takeaways though, right? Before we hit the Q&A time, if we have any. Native tools, right? It's really important. If you want to be able to do this on HubSpot. It's important to have apps that are built to do this on HubSpot, right? There are a lot of apps out there where the integration with HubSpot is just to check the box. It's an afterthought. It's not a product built from the ground up to work with HubSpot. Both Event Happily and Portant were built to work natively with HubSpot and were built with HubSpot in mind. That's the biggest difference to me between an integration and an app. Okay. Let's just keep that in mind. Also, especially when it comes to event management and for documentation, right? The automation is just going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to make you scale much quicker, right? Imagine if you had to make all of those name tags by hand. Imagine if you had to make all those tickets by hand, right? Save yourself the headache, save yourself the hassle, automate that stuff, right? I know that I say very often in a lot of my content, just because you can automate it doesn't mean you should. In this case, automate it. And again, it all comes back down to the importance of having one system, one place, everything in sync, right? HubSpot is that true universal translator for apps working together, for any sort of process you want to run on it. There's a big benefit of using it, not only just to have all your stuff in one place, but to be able to create these experiences, and events are all about experiences, but to create these like experiences and documentation and content through these apps that are just working together. Cool. Folks, if you guys have any other questions about Event Happily, if you want to check it out, reach out to my friend Joe St. Germain. He is our head of event sales here at Happily. He'd be more than happy to give you a demo, talk through what your actual event needs are, see if it's a good fit. And I'm also here to nerd out about it. If you ever want to just pick my brain on event stuff, I could talk to you about it for hours. James, if folks want to learn more about Portant, where do they need to go? Who do they need to talk to? What should they do?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on that email address if you want, or on LinkedIn. Please, let's connect. And I share lots of updates about what we're working on and stuff, and sneak peeks. Be more than happy to chat about and geek out about anything document automation or related.
Got it. And I just want to confirm your email here, because I think we missed a dot. So it's James at portant.co. Not at Portant.co. But that's fine. You can see it right down here. Portant.co. Sweet. Awesome. James, I appreciate your time. Folks watching at home,
thank you very much.
We appreciate your time too as well. And hit us up if you want to talk about events or Doc Gen. We got you. We're here for you.
Thank you. See ya.
Peace.